Single-family lot size in Salt Lake County right now is 7,000 square feet, which would shock most people. That's the kind of density you're seeing in the counties north of LA. So that's what Envision Utah does. We bring people together to study and think about the future. We do it by respecting everybody's ideas, analyzing alternative choices, and then letting the public look at those choices, get educated, and make decisions. And we went from 1996, I think was, we lost the vote on whether or not to build light rail in Utah. Went down in flames. It was viewed as a communist conspiracy by a lot of Utahns. After the visioning effort in '99, 84% of Utahns wanted that system built and built as fast as possible. So that's the power of doing the kind of long-range thinking we do. So I want to talk about air quality. We're in the middle of a process called Your Utah, Your Future. It was kicked off with the governor about a year and a half ago. The governor's office and the legislature really don't do long-range planning. If you pin them down about the longest they look out about 5 years. And they do it sort of from a fiscal base. It's like money rules. And so they don't think about externalities and all the effects of our behaviors beyond sort of the money side of it. And so the president of the Senate, the Utah Senate, for example, is on my executive committee because he wants us to be thinking about the long term in Utah, and as he says, the legislature is reactive. And people have to get elected next year and the next year after that. They have to react to the then current trends and thinking in Utah, whereas we're free as a nonprofit to think about and show choices over the much longer term. So we kicked off this effort called Your Utah, Your Future about a year and a half ago. We will enter the phase where we will actually ask Utahns what they want and show them a lot of choices starting April 2nd. So if you get nothing else from my discussion today, on April 2nd, between April 2nd and the end of May, we want you all to go online and tell the rest of Utah what you want the future to be like. So Dan Jones polls will be collecting all the data and doing all the sophisticated analysis. But it's designed to both show you the choices, show you the outcomes of those choices, and then let you speak loudly to the issue. So we did this before in Utah. We got 20,000 respondents. This time we're shooting for 50,000, which would be the largest response in the history of any place in America that's done a visioning project. So the other thing that's different this time is we're doing the whole state, and we're doing 11 topics. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about air quality, but I wanted to give you that much of an introduction. I want to play you a video quickly about Your Utah, Your Future.
Was it from your first breath, or did it happen along the way? Were you alone, or surrounded? Did you realize it sitting under the bright lights, or after you reached your peak? When did it happen? When did Utah become your home? When did this place become more than a line on a birth certificate, or a job, or a crush, or whatever else first brought you here? When did it become a part of you? Because just like you grew to need Utah, right now, Utah is growing, and it needs you. By the year 2050, our population will nearly double in size. It'll be your kids, your grandkids, your co-workers, your friends. Just like you, they'll need power, water, food, homes, schools, jobs, places to shop, places to play, and ways to get between them all. It'll be a challenge. It will also be an opportunity. Because how we grow is up to us. We can make a choice. Growth can be beautiful. In 1997, Envision Utah brought together tens of thousands of citizens and laid the groundwork for a better future. They shared their vision, and we worked together to bring it to life. Now it's time to do it again. Tell us how you want Utah to grow. Speak up for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the communities we build, the land we love. Our goal is 50,000, not $50,000, 50,000 voices. Will you be one of them? Right now, all you need to do is take a few seconds and commit to share your voice. Tell us, are you one of the 50,000? Your answer means everything. You can begin by visiting envisionutah.org, where you can reserve your spot to take the Your Utah, Your Future survey.
So we invite you to go sign up. If you give us your email address, we'll send the survey directly to you to make sure you get it when it's kicked off. Okay, one of the 11 topics we're looking at is air quality as part of your Utah Your Future. What will happen to air quality over the long term? Looking out to 2050, what are the strategies that matter the most? And the governor asked this Clean Air Action Team we formed. We brought together about 50 stakeholders. It's a very wide spectrum of people with diverse backgrounds and diverse perspectives. Everybody, scientists and physicians and advocacy groups and the Chamber of Commerce and industry, to look at the choices for the future. And so we've analyzed in that group, with the help of scientists, over 100 potential strategies on air quality. And so I want to tell you what the recommendations are of the Clean Air Action Team that were delivered to the governor and the legislature a few months ago, to give you a sense of what the results are of all that analysis. Because a lot of things we talk about make a little difference, and a few things can make a lot of difference. And so I'm not discounting a lot of the things you may hear matter, but I am saying there are some really important ones we all have to focus on. By the way, you can, if you want to go play with the impacts on air quality of different choices, we currently have online, if you go to envisionutah.org, a game on air quality where you can try different strategies and watch the emissions go up and down in 2050. Okay? So we invite you to do that if you'd like to. Now, I want to talk for a minute about why air quality matters to Utahns. And to do that, I want to talk about value laddering, which is something, anybody ever heard of value laddering? I didn't think so. Okay. This is the most sophisticated technique ever developed to understand what people want in their lives. So we interviewed like 400 people. We created a map, a mind map for Utahns, and then we go out and statistically validate which channels on that mind map matter the most. So, for example, air quality is a characteristic of this region. It's an attribute, but it has impacts in our lives. It changes our lives in different ways if the air is clean or if it's dirty. And that makes us feel certain ways, and that ties into values, which then is our decision-making process. And so I want to show you the three things that we know Utahns care about the most. Now, I'm talking in general, but 30% of Utahns, this is their primary focus in life. It's about, do I live in a place that is safe and secure for myself, for my family, and so on? Is it a good community? This matters a lot to Utahns, and it's their number one values orientation. Now, when you're a student and you're single and you're not married, this one doesn't matter as much to you. But someday, if you get married and have a child, this one will jump to the top. It's almost instinctive in all of us. So, does bad air quality threaten having a safe, secure place to raise a family?
Yeah.
Okay. So air quality impinges straight on the number one value of Utahns. It affects our health. It affects how you feel as a parent. I mean, I've had two of my daughters-in-law say, should we be moving to Park City to get our kids out of this air? Okay? And my answer is, well, you have to make that choice yourself. But here are some pros and cons. Now, that's the number one value. So air quality implicates that one. This is the number two one. Can I make a living? How expensive is it to live here? You know, this is sort of fundamental to my life. Can I earn enough money to do the other things I want to do, and so on? Does air quality impact the economy and jobs?
Yeah.
How? Some of you students, how would it impact the jobs you may or may not
Sick
get?
days out of work.
It's what?
Sick days, days off work.
Sick days off work, so it's a
Productivity.
direct impact on that. Okay, what else?
Corporate recruitment.
Corporate recruitment. So I have a son-in-law who went to Google before they went public. He then went to China and helped them open up China, and then he's back in Utah with a young startup company. He's got 60 software engineers. He flies the kids out from MIT and Stanford, and he flies them out. You know what time of the year he flies them out?
In February.
No, the truth is that is when he does fly them out, because most of them want to ski. And so if he wants to show off Utah's skiing, they come at their MIT break in January. So I had dinner last year, not this year, with 3 of his MIT kids that he brought out. Sorry, calling college-age kids, but to me, you're kids still. Okay, so he flies them out. He invites me to go to dinner with them to talk about the future of Utah. What do you think their first question was a year ago in January? It was about the air quality. Okay, so it is directly impacting his ability to get the people he needs for his company. And so, it's those kind of companies that are growing. He's grown from 5 software engineers to 60 in 18 months. Okay? And so, it has a direct impact on our, not just our ability to go to work and feel good and so on, but it has a direct impact on economic development. If you ask Jeff Edwards, who runs the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, he says air quality is the #1 issue he has to deal with now. He actually had one group get off the plane, and before they got to downtown Salt Lake, asked me to take him back to the airport. So that's the #2 value. This is the #3 value with Utahns. Once they know they're in a safe, secure environment and they can make a living, what's the next thing they want? We want to play. We love this place. Utahns are about the happiest bunch on earth. In fact, we were statistically determined to be the happiest place on earth in some national poll recently. I don't know how you determine that, but they declared us the happiest place.
Well, we do have Happy Valley.
We do have Happy Valley, but that's down that way, right? Okay. So, does bad air quality implicate your ability to recreate and enjoy the scenic beauty of Utah? Okay, what does the bad air quality do to you? How does it make you feel?
Sick.
Anybody jog? Got a jogger here? Okay, how does it make you feel when you look out there and you know it's a red air day?
It's terrible.
Okay? You feel confined, trapped, I can't go do it, and you don't feel like you're doing what you should physically and so on. I mean, there are all these emotional components to air quality. Now, I've got to admit something about my past. I once was the president of Geneva Steel. When U.S. Steel decided to close that plant, 2 stupid lawyers decided to buy it and rescue it for 10 years. I was one of the 2 stupid lawyers. I was also an engineer by training, which was helpful, but not enough. So we got there and found out all their warranties about its compliance with air quality standards were lies. So we cleaned up the plant. We spent $200 million, won the EPA Award of Merit for being the fastest cleanup in history of a steel plant. Okay, so I have that in my background, that I know a lot about air quality, I know a lot about how it's measured, I know a lot about the standards, and so on. And I just remember the emotional way people responded to Geneva when we got there. The first winter was a bad winter. It was just like the one we had last year. And I said to Dick Worthman, who was this pollster nationally known on values, I said, well, I actually asked you this question after we cleaned it up and the valley was in compliance. I said, why don't they love us? They should love us now. He said, they will never love you. He said, air quality implicates so many values, so many human feelings, emotionally, that you will never do enough. That's Tornado. That was great advice. It was great advice. And by the way, the fact that I was there and did that gives me some standing to talk to refineries about what they ought to do about the future. Okay, so this is why air quality matters to us. It affects all 3 of the major value ladders. If you say what are the most negative things about Utah, air quality comes out as #1. For 10% of Utahns, their #1 values orientation is, we got to fix this air quality problem. Okay, now we did a poll about a year ago about what Utahns said they were willing to do about air quality, and look at the top 3. They're almost tied with each other. They sort of stand out for the next one. Expand and improve the public transportation system. Okay, get out of our cars, drive less, #1. #2, improve the energy efficiency in our homes. Now this was unaided, so we hadn't educated them. This was just to get their initial reactions. And 3, change the cars we drive. Were those the right strategies? Well, we'll see. We'll talk about that. But those were the 3 the public picked out, and I was actually quite pleased they did. Now, I want to talk about, for a minute, the 11 topics we're dealing with here in Utah, your future. And there are more topics here than those 11. For example, healthcare is on here. But we asked Utahns, what are the most important, if you look to the long-term future of Utah, what are the most important challenges we have, the most important issues? What do they pick as 1, 2, and 3? Water, education, air, and they come out at the top of pretty much every survey. But for the first time, we actually asked Utahns, how are we doing on those topics? Now look at the bottom. What's at the bottom? And I would ask you, if any of you are statisticians, do you see any significance in how much difference there is? Look at all of those lined up in the 4s, 6s, the 5 1s, and then 3.4 for air quality. Education, by the way, a lot of questions among Utah and Utahns' minds about how we're doing on education as well, but that's a different talk. But you can see air quality matters to Utahns. It's right at the top, and they think we're doing poorly. They gave us I'd say a 3.4 on a 7-point scale is a flunking grade if I were grading students, right? Now, I want to talk about who's responsible for a moment, because this is a part of the message a lot of people don't like to hear. If you look at the actual contributions of who is producing the emissions that affect the air quality, the pie chart looks like the bottom line in light green. 57% vehicles. Now this is 2 years ago. The vehicles have already dropped. 57% vehicles, 32% area sources, 11% industry. This is the Salt Lake Valley, okay? And then if you look at the perceived contribution, where do most people think it's coming from? Again, you got the cars right. They got the cars as the biggest thing. What's next? Industry. What's the third in their mind? And relatively small contributor. Various sources. And I want you to think about that, because we're going to add 2.5 million people. We're going to add 800,000 new housing units along the Wasatch Front. We're going to add buildings for 1.4 million new jobs by 2050. So I want you to think about warehouses, office buildings, your research facilities, manufacturing plants, plus 800,000 new houses. And so this is another part of the message I think that matters. This is the amount of tons of pollutants that are involved in PM2.5 that we are putting into the airshed in Salt Lake County. And you can see it's gone from 409,000 in 2002 to 217,000 in 2011. We actually are doing better. So why are we all upset? So if we've actually almost cut it in half, and we actually have cut it in half by now, why are we all unhappy about it?
It's not good enough.
You know, when I go to rural Utah, I start out a texting poll I do with this question. I said, you know, just for fun, I have this polling question, see if they can figure out how to text on their phone, particularly everybody my age. You know, I have to turn to the young person next to them and say, okay, show them how to text to do this poll. But one of the questions I ask is, why are you glad you don't live along the Wasatch Front? And one of the answers I put there is, you don't have to see the air you breathe. Right? Okay, so we can see it. It makes us feel bad, that's still. But more importantly, the Clean Air Science Advisory Committee, which advises the EPA on standards, has determined from a health standpoint that the old standards were not healthy. And so PM10 at 150 micrograms per cubic meter, we now have PM2.5, the smaller particles regulated at 35 micrograms per cubic meter. And so we're chasing the smaller particles that can get deep into your lungs and have the most physical impacts. And they are finding all sorts of things which are scary. Like people my age have heart attacks during bad air days. There's actually a statistically significant heart attack rate. I have a son who's an emergency room physician in a couple of hospitals down here, and he sees things that surprised me. Sometimes I hear this and I go, are you sure? Are you really sure that it's having that impact? But we are finding lots of health impacts now we have better science. And so we are more concerned because the health implications, I think, are greater and we understand it better. Okay, so what were the recommendations? Well, first to look at recommendations, you have to look at that pie chart. And this is the updated pie chart. You notice that in 2 years, mobile sources have gone from 57 to 48% of the pie chart. Why is that happening? Why did they get cleaner all of a sudden?
More electric vehicles.
Yeah, well, that's one way, but the electric vehicles are still so minuscule in Utah.
I don't think people are driving less, I really don't.
Public transportation.
Well, the miles driven VMT has actually dropped a little tiny bit since 2000 in Utah. Okay, it's probably going to go back up with the economy recovering. We're not sure yet, but we actually did break the 100-year trend of driving more every decade in Utah. But the reason that's going down is because the Tier 1 vehicles are being phased out by people buying Tier 2 vehicles, and so every tier change in emission standards and the cars actually makes a whopping change in the bad air quality.
What is a Tier 1?
Okay, a tier 1 is anything produced really before 2004. How many of you have a car that's older than 2004? I expect to see a number of student hands go up, right? Right? We drive junkers because that's all you can afford, right? Well, if it's before 2004, it's a lot dirtier than it was made in 2004 after. So, because that's when tier 2 vehicles. Now, it takes 20 years to change the fleet.
Tier 2 or tier 1?
Tier 1 became tier 2 in 2004. So in 2004, the big break on cleaner.
Tier 3 when?
Okay, tier 3, I'll get to tier 3 in just a second. You're way ahead of me. Okay, tier 2. So the reason it's getting cleaner right now is we're getting rid of those older cars. We're finally getting people to tier 2 cars. And it's making a big change. If you look at the air quality improvement in the air sheds along the Wasatch Front, what's the big contributor to the improvement? It's those damn federal government emission standards. I'm speaking as a conservative in Utah. It's that federal intrusion on my right to pollute. Okay, so,
Libertarians do that.
right? Okay, so it's actually changed. But if you just looked at this pie chart, and you said, where would you put your energy and strategies? Where would you put your energy? I'd go there first. Where would I go second? Area. Where would I go third? Okay, now, there's a new state implementation plan, and I want to say something about, then you can ask a question.
Yeah.
On the point sources, the new state implementation plan takes almost every industry in Utah from wrapped, reasonably available control technologies to the next federal standard, which is BACT, best available control technologies. Every point source in Utah is taking a big hit in the SIP right now. So, go ahead and ask your question.
With the mobile sector, how is the percentage measured? Because there's a big mobile section in the industrial sites as well, right?
They're actually,
Like
Kennecott's
all
big trucks,
trucks
they're
and
actually in here.
stuff in the 13?
They're in the air, because they're off-road. Yeah, they're in the area sources. Yeah, this does include diesel trucks. It includes the big vehicles going on. It includes everything that rolls on the street.
But so mobile isn't just individual people's cars.
No,
It's all
it's not.
industry,
It's not.
School bus fleet.
The nice thing about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is there are standards for diesel trucks, there are standards for our cars, there are standards for everybody. If it rolls on a freeway or on the street, then it's in that mobile and it's getting regulated. So,
But it skews a little bit the statistics of the first slide you showed how much industry contributes to.
not really. This is actually the tons of emissions from those sources. Oh, you're saying for the area?
Exactly.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. There are some of the large diesel construction vehicles for everybody. I use Kennecott as an example, but you can include every construction company in Utah. Okay, fits into that.
When you say that this is total emissions in tons, are you talking CO2 emissions?
These are PM 2.5 precursor
PM
emissions.
2.5.
So this is aimed at how to fix the particulate matter issue, which is our greatest problem. So it's not. So I'm not doing carbon footprint at the moment, but I'll tell you this: every bit of fuel we don't burn, carbon emissions come from burning something. So we need to burn things that have less carbon in them, and we have to burn less stuff. Okay, and then it's just that simple. Okay,
Or leave it in the ground, right?
or what?
Leave it in the ground.
Or leave it in the ground, right? Just don't use it. Well, that's happening in Utah, by the way. Nobody's built a coal-fired power plant in Utah for more than a quarter of a century.
How many
And they're all
coal-fired
phasing
power
out.
plants are there now working?
In Utah,
Yeah.
the biggest one is the Delta plant. Who owns the Delta plant?
Los Angeles.
Right? And where does the power go? The Los Angeles Water and Power. They built a coal-fired power plant in Utah, and it goes against our state's record on coal, but all the power is going to Los Angeles. Now that is the most
Agreed.
two-faced. Okay. In other words, California doesn't have to take credit for that coal. We get credit for that coal. They're going to repower that plant. But every coal-fired power plant in Utah is going to be gone. That's a battle that's ended. I mean, the new regulation of power plants is going to take down every coal-fired power plant in America in the next 20 years, probably.
How long will it take to phase out the Delta plant?
The Delta plant's going to repower with natural gas. Now, That's what they're,
It's gonna be retrofitted to.
is retrofitted to natural
By-
gas.
by
That-
when?
I don't know. I don't know. All right,
Maybe
so,
we need a shelf drop off. We're in California.
so now I want to talk to you a little bit about the area sources. This is a prediction of vehicle miles traveled when we had 2.5 million more people. I don't think that's going to happen, but I want you to look at the building prediction. Those are the area sources. The dominant area source is buildings. It's, how many of you live in a house? You live in a house, right? You have 2 fires in your house, right? You're usually in the basement. What are the 2 fires in your house? Furnace and your water heater. How efficient do you think having a zillion little fires going on in all of our homes is? Sounds like what we did in the 1800s in Utah, right? We had fires in our houses, right? Well, we still all have fires in our houses, and that's the predominant source, and we're going to double the number of buildings, right? So I want you to think about the buildings for a minute. So, what are the major recommendations? Number 1 is Utahns should be early adopters of good technology. Okay, and the best technological change available is getting to tier 3 vehicles and fuel as fast as humanly possible. That will make the biggest change, and I'll show you why. So, public transportation is very important, but this chart shows what happens. These are our current cars. This is if the whole fleet were tier 3 cars. Okay, and they remember how big the mobile source component is? Okay, that's an 80% decrease. So a tier 3 car emits the precursor gases of PM2.5 80% less. In other words, if I could take all the cars on this campus and I could replace them right now with tier 3 vehicles, this campus from mobile sources would emit 80% less. It would be like taking 4 out of every 5 cars and shooting them through the head or splitting their tires. Right? I mean, people just, I just want you to think with me about what's the one thing you can do that will change the air quality faster than anything else in Utah. It's to drive those mobile sources down. Now, that's not enough. It's not sufficient, but it's clearly the biggest thing you do. We can all try and drive 15% less and get you this reduction, which is really important. We need that long term too. But every person who walks into a showroom, how many of you have bought a car in the last year? Anybody? Wow, that's terrifying. Just terrifying. Because the cars you bought are tier 2 cars.
No.
Did you buy what did you buy?
Subaru PZ.
Okay. All right, so Subaru is the only,
I want an incentive. When you finally get tier 3 fuel available in the market, then I want an incentive to switch out my carburetor, which will be shot.
okay, right, well, we talked about that. We're going to talk about why tier 3 cars work in a minute, but thank you. She bought a Subaru,
PZ technology.
which means
It means that the way
PZEV.
I forget.
Partial zero emission
Partial
vehicle.
zero emissions vehicle or something like that. Right, Subaru is the best set of cars. You're going to go buy a new car, go buy a Subaru. I'm not singing for that brand, but most people buying cars in Utah are buying tier 2 cars right now. And you can put a tier 3 Toyota Camry next to a tier 2 Toyota Camry, and you can't see any difference. The one maybe costs $75 more. That's all. $75. Now, why aren't we getting them in Utah? When you go into a showroom, those of you who bought a car, when you went to the showroom, how many salesmen said to you, you want to do something for clean air? Because this is the car with the new catalytic converters on it, and we'll do that for you. How many of you, anybody get that speech? You did. You asked them. You asked them. I know what you did. See, and
I sold it to them.
right, and I actually bought a car this year myself, and I put them through the rigor like you probably did. Okay, but the number one thing Utahns can do is not buy a car that's a tier 2 car right now. Buy a tier 3 car, and there are cars in Utah that qualify as tier 3 cars today, and then by 2017, they'll be phasing in all across America in a bigger way. But the phase-in is 10 years, and so the fleet that's being sold in Utah will change from 2017 to 2027, and then it takes 20 years to turn it over. See how long it can take to get this benefit? And so we need to incentivize this kind of car, but more importantly, Utahns need to understand what makes the difference. Okay, now, how many of you heard the state address a year ago, the governor take on the refineries and say they should produce tier 3 fuel. Okay? These cars work best if they have tier 3 fuel in them. Tier 3 fuel takes sulfur content from 30 parts per million down to 10 parts per million. So I'm going to give you a lesson on catalytic converters for a moment. Catalytic converters have two problems. Problem number one is they don't heat up very quickly. And so until the substrate in there with the chemicals on it that catch the nitrogen oxide gases, until that substrate is hot, it doesn't react with the NOx and catch it. Okay? So, what did they do in a tier 3 vehicle to fix that? They put the catalytic converter right under the engine where it heats up really instantaneously. So you've heard the speech, if you drive to the track station, you've done 80% of the polluting you would have done all day by driving your car around because of the cold start. Well, the cold start thing is fixed in tier 3 vehicles. Okay, the other thing about the tier 3,
What is a tier 3 while you're taking a break?
what's tier 3 what?
What's the tier 3? You keep mentioning tier 3. What is a tier 3?
Okay.
You mentioned tier 1 and tier 2.
Okay, a tier 3 car fundamentally has a number of environmental characteristics that are better, but the most important one is the catalytic converter. And so the catalytic converter heats up instantaneously. The second thing is just the progress of technology. There's a lot more substrate in it. They've made these thinner ceramic and very thin metal substrates with more chemical reactants on them, so they catch a lot more of the emissions. It's just that simple. It's not tricky. Catalytic converters are a known technology, so we're not playing with rocket science here. We're playing with something we've had on our cars for a long time. They're just getting better. And so a tier 3 car has the ability to capture a lot more of the pollutants before they go out the tailpipe, about 80% more. The other thing is the tier 3 gas. Let me explain that. Tier 3 gas drops the sulfur content because when you burn sulfur in your fuel, you burn everything with oxygen. So I have sulfur and oxygen, and I make, what's the common word for that? SO1, SO2, SO3. SOx. The X is for the numbers, right? So you make SOx. SOx reacts on the catalytic converter, but has a stronger bond than the NOx. And so it fouls up your catalytic converter. So without the tier 3 fuel, we get only a portion of the benefit of the cleaner tier 3 catalytic converters. And so Utah's refineries are all small, plus 3 of the big ones all have other out-of-state plants where they can trade sulfur reductions in California and not make them here. And so the governor's been out and met with the CEO of every company that's got a refinery in Utah, pushing down, okay, to get us tier 3 fuels in Utah. He's got commitments from all of them, some commitment from all of them. One is still being pretty fuzzy, but the governor's on this and being very aggressive about it, okay? We cannot require it. We cannot require it. This is the dirty trick about federal regulation. Sometimes regulation, they make a deal at a federal level. Well, the oil refineries for decades have made deals with the EPA which require that all gas be the same. And we cannot, so as a lawyer, the federal government has preempted the right to make regulations about the kind of cars we drive and about the kind of fuel that goes in those cars. And although the EPA has designated 7 counties in Utah as the most important places in America to have tier 3 gas, we are the one place that could get left out almost completely, because the big 3 could leave us out. So you cannot regulate it.
If SB 87 had made it through,
It wouldn't matter.
it wouldn't have.
It would not matter this at all.
Why?
Because it's federally preempted. The federal law is that once the federal government legislates in an area where it's entitled to legislate and starts to fill in with regulations, they are deemed to have taken over that area of the law, and states cannot go against them. And so by statute, federal statute, we do not have the right to independently regulate tier 3.
So would it make more sense for a group in Utah, like Utah Physicians, to sue the EPA on behalf of that?
No, it won't work. I'm sorry, as a lawyer, I just know the legal route to doing that, they'd lose that case. It's a Commerce Clause case. The federal government has the right to do what's done. And then I'm going to go back here, and then I'm going to...
If you've got time in your presentation, can you maybe explain how California managed to...
Yeah, California got a special exemption in the statute itself. many, many years ago to have its own vehicles, okay? And other states can join that, but we can't because we're not adjoining states that are in. So
Why are we not joining states that are in that?
we're not adjoining. We have to be
Oh,
next
excellent.
door to them under federal law. Yeah. Anyway, you're into a complex area of the law, but the answer is the odds are like 1 in 100 that we could try and regulate successfully tier 3.
So I know you're, this is really quick, I'm hoping, you're talking about tier 3 cars, just wanted to know, are they branded any differently, do they have a model number, how do you
Oh,
know? if-
thank you
if
for
you're
asking
looking
this
for one?
question.
How do you know?
Okay, so when you go into a car dealership, there's a sticker on the window. It's about this big. What's the big number right there on the sticker? The miles per gallon. There's a number over here called the smog rating. There's a smog rating. 10 is perfect. Okay? You drive an all-electric vehicle that doesn't produce anything. I'm not talking about carbon emissions somewhere else with methane. Okay? But locally it doesn't produce anything. That's a 10. That Subaru she's got is a 9. But you ought to buy an 8, 9, or 10. If you buy an 8, 9, or 10, you've got a tier 3 equivalent. Okay? So the smog rating, thank you, that's the
What if
most
you-
important
what if you
message
buy
here, is you
used?
can't tell when you walk on the showroom floor,
You just have to look
even
it
if
up.
they don't
Look it
care.
up? Okay.
Subaru has had
Yeah.
pickup technology
Oh, yes, thank
since
you.
2009. So
You're
that's a
with two.
general
We know
rule
each
of
other.
thumb.
We'll talk about it. Okay.
It's changed.
I mean, mine's a
Okay,
2000, that's
okay,
not-
okay. Let me just say, you can go on a website, just Google tier 3 cars for 2015, and the whole list will come up.
Where do hybrids fall into all that?
Hybrids are better because they're lower gas
Right,
mileage.
but
They're
do they
great.
fall into that tier
Most-
structure?
Yes.
Okay.
All the hybrids you've been buying are tier 2.
Tier 2 or
Two.
tier 3?
Two.
Two.
Two. Two. I bet your hybrid, I've got a partner who drives a hybrid, it's a 6.
So, oh, sorry.
It's a 6. It's a tier 2 vehicle. 6 is the average of tier 2 vehicles.
So it's not all it's cracked up to be,
No, it's not. It's good on fuel economy.
but not on emissions.
But not on, it's better because you're using less fuel on emissions,
Right.
but it's not, it doesn't have the fancy new catalytic converter.
Do they make
Which you
tier
all
3
want to own
hybrids?
and hug your catalytic
Do they
converter.
make tier 3 hybrids?
Yes, they are making tier 3 hybrids. Yes, absolutely. You can go to California and buy a tier 3 hybrid today. They're just, the dealers aren't pulling them into Utah. We need to get them to pull into Utah, so.
Subaru is pulling, all the Subaru dealers at the Wasatch Front are pulling them to
Yeah, well, and that's
Is your car a
because,
hybrid?
Pisa, no.
no, the Subaru is not, but it's just, they have just gotten the technology right, Subaru. I was speaking to our former, well, that's another story. Let's just keep on. Okay, area sources. I want to talk about area sources for a minute because they're a big part of this problem and they're going to double. Okay, we have area sources coming out of all these buildings right now, and we can't do much about those unless we go back and retrofit all those buildings, which we should do. Okay, but that's expensive. So, what are the things we got to do? Number one, this is a big controversy in Utah, but the fact is we need to eliminate during the inversion period, and the inversion starts to build the day after the snowstorm. It's building today, okay, out there. And so we need to. My mother used to tell me, your right's end where my nose begins. You know, if you're going to slug somebody, well, I breathe with my nose as well as get punched in the nose. Okay, and so wood burning also produces wonderful VOCs. It produces carcinogens. It has all sorts of other nasty things about it. But we're going to have to grow up and not burn wood for heat along the Wasatch Front. And I don't care how politically unpalatable that is. People are doing that. It's like one wood burning home is equal to 200 natural gas fired homes. It's just that simple. Okay. Oops, I skipped to number 2. Replace your water heater. There is now a water heater. It's called a low NOx water heater, ultra low NOx water heater. It looks just like your water heater. It may cost a little less or it may cost a little more depending on where you go online. You can order it through, actually, we just did this study for the Air Quality Board, and some were less and some were more. I can send it to you, but the differential is very small, okay? Because all they've done in it is reshape the flame when you burn the natural gas so it doesn't get as hot. So what's air made up of? So I get air in there to burn with my natural gas.
Nitrogen and oxygen.
I got nitrogen. Nitrogen's the most, right?
78%.
75, 80% is nitrogen, I don't know exactly.
78.
Okay, but what you don't want to do is you don't want that flame to crack nitrogen bonds and produce NOx, NO, NO1, NO2, NO3, okay? You don't want that to happen, so you tune the flame so it's not as hot. It's just reshaping the little teeny burner nozzle. And with that, 70% of the nitrogen oxide gases that become PM 2.5 that come out of your house, out of your water heater, which is half your house, by the way, on this in terms of emissions, it goes away. Now, how many of you have had a water heater go out? You've all got to raise your hand on that one. Water heaters last about 10 years. Just want to show you this chart. If we just phased in these water heaters over 10 years, that's how many tons we get. We get this much by changing wood burning, taking 75% of the wood burning out. But just changing the water heaters, So Cleaner Action Team made this proposal, the Air Quality Board, and they're studying right now.
What about the tankless water heaters? How do they?
Instant heat.
Yeah, I said you got to do two things: use less fuel or burn it cleaner. Use less fuel if it's instantaneous. You know, it's better. I mean, if you're not sitting there with keeping a tank hot all the time, right?
But that's not the same as a low NOx. So
No, it's not the same.
Low NOx.
So
Yeah.
shouldn't we be moving in that direction?
Yes, eventually I think we will move in that direction, but the ultra low NOx is such a whopping change and with no additional cost. Those kind of instantaneous are more expensive.
Have you been able to get any vendors, like big box vendors like Home Depot?
Yeah.
In Utah to carry low NOx?
The answer is they will be carrying the low NOx, particularly if the Air Quality Board says use up your current inventory and then carry the low NOx, which is where we're going. Okay, I just want you to look at the others on here. If we change our building codes to the 2015 Energy Conservation Codes, the new homes would be use half as much fuel. Would that be a big deal if we're going to build 800,000 new homes and all the other buildings? Okay. Right now, the builders are up at the legislature talking them in to only changing building codes once a decade.
Oh, please.
So we can build another 150,000 houses before we would change it. Okay, just let you. These are. Yeah, it's so intuitively obvious. Oh, the cost of doing this on new buildings is about 2% to 4%. It's in that range. But the fact is, this has a payback. This will pay itself back even at current natural gas prices. Okay. The other thing on here, so you go wood burning. What if we went back in and just retrofitted 30%? Made the existing homes more efficient. You also get a chunk. But what are the biggest things on here? Wood burning, ultra NOx water heaters, and build the new homes cleaner. Okay. That's how we're going to get to the area sources. There really is no other answer besides that. Okay, now I'm done. I'm going to let you go. We're supposed to be out of here pretty quick. Okay.
Lots of questions.
Yeah, okay. We're going to go from 2.9 million people to 5.4 million people by 2050. That's 35 years from now. Doesn't sound very far away, but the people standing here 35 years ago were not thinking we were going to be where we are today. So we need to think that through. And so I would invite you to join in the Utah Your Future effort, where we're looking at all these topics. The survey goes live April 7th, April 2nd, statewide. It'll be up for 2 months, where Utahns can get educated across 4 scenarios on every topic. Every topic will have 4 sets of choices, and if you do this, this is what Utah will be like. If you do this, this is what Utah will be like. They're those kind of scenario choices. They're a lot of fun. It's very interesting. And I think you'll really enjoy it, but we need to hear from you. If you want cleaner air, somebody has to say loudly to the legislature, they ought to do more than they're doing, right? And so we want 50,000 Utahns to respond and say it loudly. What is it you want in your future? What do you want Utah to be like for your children and grandchildren? And air quality is our #1 top of mind issue in the state that makes a negative, that's a negative. And so I'm very optimistic about this. If we just went out and decided we as people were going to buy streetcars, if we were going to replace those water heaters, if we were going to build the new homes cleaner, we could make a whopping difference. We could fix this in a few short years, and we could stay down under even where the new standards will take us, which we need to do in Utah, so we're not bumping up against them and cracking our heads open every 4 or 5 years when they change standards. Thank you for being here. Questions? People want to ask questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you see, is there wood
increasing like commuting make any sort of significant difference?
Increase in biking?
Yeah, like commuting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you turn that car, if you don't turn the car on, I have 10 employees in the division, Utah, 3 of them ride their bikes to work. One of them rides even in blizzards. So, yeah, I'm a big bully. When I talk about multimodal transportation, we should think walk, bike, then we should train, bus, then we should think car. And car with more than one person in it. Yeah, yes.
So, can Utah regulate its own emission standards for cars, or does that still fall under?
It falls under the federal preemption. And that's a long legal question.
But-
Well,
They're
but,
not gonna get auto manufacturers to make custom cars because that's too small.
no, but we knew that they are now producing the 50 statewide cars, which are the tier 3, which is what we want in Utah. Yes.
So your 15% of your point source,
Yeah.
is that all industrial?
Point sources are anything that's big enough that they're not a minor source. It's a definition, it's so many, like 15,000 tons per something or other. But yeah, they're refineries, they're manufacturing, they're Kennecott smelters, you know.
How about the Kennecott mine?
The mine itself has some vehicles in it, but in terms of actually being a point source, the answer is it's not a point source, it's an area source.
Does the airport fall into that category?
The airport is a really interesting thing because none of us who understand the economy here would trade off that hub airport. I mean, people can fly here from all over the world and do business. It's really important to us, but planes are a terrible environmental problem. Okay, I'll just leave that at that. We haven't figured out that. That's why we have to do everything we can do, because that hub airport ought to stay, in my view. Okay, the planes ought to get cleaner. Right, but that's a federal preemption issue too.
So if you go back to your
Yeah.
15%,
Yeah, so
is that an annual number or is that?
that's the pie chart on a winter day
On
when
a
we have a
winter day.
problem. Yeah.
What would it look like if it was an annual number?
Or it's about the same. I mean, the cars make the same amount of NOx, but you're not heating your home, but you are heating your water. So the area sources would probably go down like 40% of that area source, but it's not going to change dramatically. Okay. Yes.
So from your data, it shows that the water heaters can make such a huge difference. So what is the chance or the likelihood of the state providing even small subsidies for people purchasing water heaters to purchase these ones?
Or tax incentives.
Tax incentives?
Actually, as a practical matter, since they cost, once we get the flow of them coming to Utah, they're going to cost about the same. I mean, you can go on and order them on Home Depot and stuff from California, have them delivered here. The answer is I don't think they're going to subsidize that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. I just don't think.
Well,
You asked me what do I think the odds are. I think the
Yeah.
odds are lousy. Do I think it's a good policy? Yes.
I mean, it could also serve as like an educational campaign. Even
Yes.
if $50 subsidy will help people to look into why
Right.
they're getting a $50 subsidy.
Right. I'm a believer on this. I go at regulation carefully, but I'm a big believer that since there's not a big cost hit here, we just ought to require that that's all that's stocked in Utah. And
That's important because the way people replace water heaters is typically one breaks and they take whatever the guy has on the truck.
that's exactly right. They just take whatever's there. You got to fix this. Who is the supply chain manager? He had to leave. But it's a supply chain issue. We need to just chop that supply chain and fill it full of the right ones.
Is that happening on that?
The Air Quality Board is considering that rule. I went and gave the proposal to them about a month ago. It's under consideration, and I think we will. They're watching the wood smoke issue really closely because a lot of them are still trying to pull the arrows out of their back. Okay?
So why is, I don't think the water heater issue is as big a deal as the wood smoke issue.
The water heater will do more for the PM 2.5 than the wood smoke will do.
Right, but
But the wood smoke has the other
I
ramp.
don't think that there will be people
Politically.
complaining about that they have to buy this type of water heater compared to that.
We are hoping so.
Can you actually order a water heater now from Home Depot?
Yes.
And
Yes,
and
you
have
can
it sent to
go, you
a
can
Home
go get an ultra low NOx water heater today I'm waiting for the next one of mine to go out, mine never last 10 years. Mine lasts about 7 years. Yes.
You haven't mentioned.
Well, I didn't hear that comment, and I heard that comment about, this is how many showers my wife likes. She likes very hot, very long showers.
You haven't mentioned two issues that I think also need to be mentioned. You're having a given that the population in the Wasatch Front will double. And I
Right.
think we need to talk about that. Utah Population Environment Coalition here has a booth. And there's another handout there,
Right.
which I've developed, which is a 400 mile per gallon equivalent electric solar powered vehicle,
Okay?
which pollutes zero.
Right.
And you could install a 1,000-watt solar system in your home and never burn any coal in Utah, which is still 80% of our electricity.
Okay.
And people are not talking about outside that box of buying a fossil fuel vehicle. I think we need to start
Well,
talking about
I just met with the president
non-fossil
of the
fuel.
university and gave me the lesson on where the hydrogen comes from for the hydrogen fuel cells and where the electricity comes from for the electric vehicles and so on. So I understand they're not in this airshed. But there's a whole interesting debate about the future of vehicles and what kind of vehicles. Right now for Utahns, the thing we can do, which is brainless, takes no effort at all, is to look at the number on the smog rating and do it. On the population issue, we have always used what are the Governor's Office of Management Budget projections, and that 2.5 million assumes a substantially decreasing birth rate in Utah, just so you'll know. But it does not assume that our economy goes bust, which is what really drives the number of people who come. If you have kids and there's no jobs, they leave. And so we got to plan ahead for what is the worst case. And I think the worst case is actually more like 2.9 million people by 2050. Yes, back row.
What do you think is the best way to support the Air Quality Board from a citizen's
I
perspective?
think they would
Considering the
love-
Woodstock debate.
Love to just address a letter to the Air Quality Board, UDEQ, Utah Department of Environmental Quality. It'll get there, and tell them you really appreciate their work. These are citizens who are there, who are appointed, and it's a brutal job. I always kid them they took the job for all the big bucks they were going to make. They are great people, so you ought to really pat them on the back because they know what are the right things to do, and they just keep chipping away at it aggressively. And so they can regulate things the legislature, unless the legislature strips them of their authority. They can do lots and lots of good things. Yes?
Could Utah accelerate the transition to Tier 3 vehicles and to electric vehicles by adopting the California Clean Car Standards?
We can't adopt the California standards under federal law unless we are adjoining states that have already adopted them, and so that it has to spread in this pattern. But what the good news is that the California standards are going nationwide with Tier 3. And so it's already done for us. The question is how fast will we adopt the new cars?
So is Nevada, Oregon, are they pursuing that because they're joining?
I mean, are they adjoining? No,
Well,
the
no, they are
answer is all of the
physically.
efforts to try and become like California by joining that provision have pretty much stopped because Tier 3 is going nationwide. So they're now calling these new cars 50-state vehicles. They'll sell in 50 states and comply with
But
Tier
now you
3.
mentioned before it was if they were joining physically.
Yeah, they have to be
geographically.
physically joining. So we
Nevada,
studied Arizona and Nevada.
Oregon.
Yeah, Nevada's not. Oregon, well, we're not adjacent to Oregon.
No, I know.
Arizona.
But my question, again, is Nevada and Oregon working on that?
No. See, all
They're
of it.
joining for crying out
Well,
loud.
but all of it stopped, so the California rule is going nationwide. That's what's happening.
When?
2013 with Tier 3 vehicles. I mean, that whole
Oh, okay, Tier 3 vehicles.
right, because Tier 3 vehicles are the California standard. Okay? Anything else? You've all been most patient.
Emissions, so car
Yeah.
emissions, one of the biggest problems on the Wasatch Front, because car emissions are because vehicle emissions are such a high rate, is that there is no standardization of emission testing
Right.
from all non-attendant counties. Now,
I was at
is
dinner.
that something?
I was at dinner one time with this really rich doctor, and he was telling me how he titled his vehicles in Wyoming, so he wouldn't have to go through our emissions test. And It would turn into a very unpleasant dinner. All I'll say. So yes, we need to have standardized testing. We need to make sure every car that drives in this airshed is clean. And truck.
Wait a minute, that needs to go as far as Twila too, because Twila doesn't have it. And you got north and you got south, and they're not following the same standard.
There's a push to do this, you know it's underway. I don't think it's gonna happen in the legislature this year, but next year.
legislature is out of it.
How can we?
I'm not gonna debate the politics of the legislature. Thank you for being here. If you want to ask any more questions.